So, well, in the last class, we went up till sloka 10, in which we saw that Arjuna coming down from his adamancy of not fighting the war, giving all the reasons that why he will not fight the war. We saw that. We also saw in the last class what when the silence was there between Arjuna and Krishna, what Sanjaya said. So Sanjaya very nicely said that there is a silence here right now, and he described the silence in a beautiful way. And in sloka number 9, he explained that he mentioned about in sloka number 9 he mentioned about Arjuna as a Gudakesaka, one who has won his sleep, which means he is dominated by the Sattva Guna, not by Tamo Guna, and followed by Raja Guna, because he is also a great warrior, which means he is a Jnani who knows everything. And he is also describing Krishna as a Rushi Kesaka, which means who has control over his mind and also having knowing the other's mind, and also Govinda, the one who takes care of the scriptures and who knows very well about the scriptures and Vedic things. Why does Sanjaya say like that, or why did Vyasacharya wrote like that? Because we learned from this last class that Dhritarashtra's wish is that the war should not happen. Without the war happening, his children should continue to rule the kingdom. So when he heard that Arjuna is not willing to fight and Arjuna is surrendering to Lord Krishna, Dhritarashtra may feel happy that there is no war is not going to be there. To make Dhritarashtra understand, subtly it is said that Dhritarashtra, don't be too happy because Arjuna is saying that he will not fight the war. Now you should know Arjuna. He said Guda Kesaka, which means he has control over his sleep, which means he is a man with Sattva Guna, means a learned person. So a learned person cannot be subdued for a longer time, or will not be in a subdued situation for a longer time. And along with that learned person, who is there? Lord Krishna. And how does he is described? Rushi Kesaka, a person who has absolute control over his mind and who can read the mind of others. And such a person, and Govinda means who is a savior or who knows very well about this Vedic scriptures. So when a learned person is going to be with another strong person, the what do you call it, the calm down or withdrawal of such a learned person is only short-lived, and Krishna knows how to get back Arjuna, and Arjuna will also definitely get back and fight the war. So this situation is short-lived. So Dhritarashtra, don't be too happy or don't expect something like that. So that was very nicely said. That's what we saw. And in sloka number 10, we saw that Lord Krishna is looking at Arjuna with a smile and ready to say the following. The following is what? The Bhagavad Gita, which Lord Krishna is going to now say. And we had a little bit understanding of to whom this Bhagavad Gita is told and what is this Bhagavad Gita is addressing. So we found out Bhagavad Gita is going to address the very basic problem of all the human being, which is not only of Arjuna, all the humans, that is Raga, Soha, Moha. Desire, attachment, and attachment created sorrowness, and sorrowness created delusion or confusion. This is what we are all into. So Bhagavad Gita is going to address this problem, and that's what we saw in the last class, and with that we stopped in the last class. So now we are going to understand a little bit more about this Bhagavad Gita, and then we will get into the actual preaching of or teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Now what Krishna is going to do here, now that we are seeing that Arjuna has become a true student who has surrendered to his Guru. And in the last class I told you, Guru is not someone we are going to go in search of. Guru is someone that it's going to happen. It is not that something we go in search and get it. It is something that is going to happen. So when a student surrenders to a guru, the only aspect, the way, the thinking that the student is going to have is that I don't know anything. You are going to tell me, or you are going to teach me what is that good for me. So when we say student, the other word that follows student is teaching, not preaching, not advice. This is very, very important that we need to understand. Whenever we say advice, it is a solution, a temporary solution for that particular situation. It may take care of the topical problem, and advice can never address the fundamental problem. To address the fundamental problem, a sufficient knowledge need to be infused. So we are going to understand a couple of things here. So one, Lord Krishna through Bhagavad Gita is going, it's a teaching from Lord Krishna. It is not an advice from Lord Krishna. So we have to look at Bhagavad Gita as a teaching, and don't look into Bhagavad Gita for some advice for your problem. It is not going to be there, and it is never going to work out like that. So when it is a teaching for that means a new knowledge. So what are you going to teach? Teaching is always something new. What I know someone is already saying is a revision. What I don't know someone is trying to tell me is called a teaching. So we have to consider Bhagavad Gita as a teaching, and that is the intention of Lord Krishna, and that is what Lord Krishna does to Arjuna here. So it's a teaching, not an advice. Okay, and the second thing that we need to understand from here is that we think that actions will take care of our problem, and we focus on actions. Actions like, as I told you in the last time, actions like going out some vacation, going for some movies or something you keep doing, getting materials, working, trying to earn money. Meditation also is an action. So we think these actions will take care of our problem. And from Bhagavad Gita and from this particular session, what you need to understand is that it is not that action that's going to take care of the problem. It is only the knowledge that is going to take care of the problem. The right knowledge is going to take care of the problem. So that is what is all about Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is going to give you that right knowledge, which only is going to address the problem. So we will also come out of this illusion, this Maya, that actions will take care of our problem, and let us understand that it's only the knowledge that's going to take care of the problem, and that knowledge is what we are going to get in Bhagavad Gita. So with this, now we will get into the Bhagavad Gita. So one, it is a teaching. It is neither a preaching nor an advice. And two, it is all about knowledge. It is not suggesting you about actions. Even the Karma Yoga is discussed, but for the problem solution, it is a knowledge, the only approach or the only tool available, and that's what we are going to see in Bhagavad Gita. With these two key understanding, and just a little bit about Bhagavad Gita, again is it has got 18 chapters with 700 verses, and we have 4 yogas in that, broadly divided: Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. And then 18 chapters are divided further into 3 parts, 6 chapters. 1 to 6 is going to talk about Karma Yoga, and 7 to 12 chapters are going to talk about Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti Yoga, and 13 to 18 chapters are going to talk about Jnana Yoga. And the knowledge that you are going to get from Bhagavad Gita is something we will really, really appreciate, and you will see that once you get that knowledge. See, knowledge is complete understanding. Knowing is different and knowledge is different. Today we are in the world of knowing because informations are available at just like in our fingertips. In those days, people used to say, you should have those informations in fingertips, which means it should be there in your mind, just like that it should come out. But today, literally it is in the fingertips only, because when you take your mobile and use your fingertips to type the Google and get into so many any website, you get that information. So literally today it is in fingertips, but that is only knowing. Availability of information with that person, that doesn't mean he has got a knowledge about it. So knowledge is something to easily know is understand is understanding. When we say understanding, I have no doubts. Whatever the doubts I had, whatever the questions I had, whatever the areas of unclarity, I have cleared everything. So understanding means I don't have anything more to know. All the doubts, questions, areas that were not clear to me, I have asked, got it clarified. So which means it is absolute clarity. Understanding means what? Having an absolute clarity on the subject. So that understanding is what called as knowledge. So Bhagavad Gita also, you should have a complete understanding. To get that understanding, I am going to try to make it as elaborate as possible, because each teaching from Bhagavad Gita is not that simple to understand. We have to go in depth. There are branches. There are a lot of things behind those verses. So just by knowing the verses or getting the meaning of the verses, we are not going to understand Bhagavad Gita. So I am going to be elaborate in my approach, giving a lot of examples and a lot of sub informations that will establish what is said in the Bhagavad Gita. So with that introduction, let us now get into sloka number 11, from where it starts. And it starts with a very powerful statement. Lord Krishna starts with a very powerful statement in sloka verse number 11. What does it say? Now Lord Krishna says, Arjuna, you are grieving for that which doesn't deserve grieving at all. This is sentence number 1. And sentence 2, wise men like you will never grieve for anything. When he say anything, he means neither for the living nor for the dead. What a powerful way of starting Bhagavad Gita. See, now the first statement itself will make us to think, what is that? Arjuna is grieving for what? He is grieving for killing his own guru, Pitamaha, Bhishmacharya, his own cousins, and so many other soldiers. He is grieving for that. And Lord Krishna says, you are grieving for something which doesn't deserve grieving. Now we will think, what is it? Grieving for the death of my own people doesn't deserve grieving. What Lord Krishna is saying. And that's a powerful statement. He opens with a sixer. The first ball itself is a sixer here. So now we need to understand this. And that is nicely established in sentence number 2. That is, wise men like you will never grieve for anything that is neither for the living nor for the dead. So which means Krishna ultimately says in this one sloka, grieving is not at all to be there. Can we accept this? Can we imagine a situation where grieving or grief is not at all there? Sorrow is not at all there? Dukh is not at all there? Can we imagine a situation like that? Can we accept it? It's very difficult. But Krishna says there is nothing for grief. See, now that is what we are going to understand from Bhagavad Gita. See, advice is going to give a solution for the problem, and Bhagavad Gita is going to tell you that there is no problem at all. That's what we are going to understand. All the advice we get from people and various medias and sources are only going to give a solution for the problem, which means it says there is a problem and this is the solution. Some people say, you wear a ring with a green stone, all your problems will over. So what do they say? There is problem and the solution is wear the ring with the green stone. You go to this temple and do this puja, your problem will be over. So what do they say? They say there is a problem To get out of the problem, go to this temple and do some pujas or some karmas there. Now the question will be, sir, I am having a heart problem. Is it a problem or not? It is a condition. Let us understand the difference between a problem and a condition. Heart problem is a condition. We don't say that as a problem. We should never say it as a problem. It's only a condition. There are conditions, there are situations. But problem is something that you create yourself and you then grieve for it. You feel sorrow for it. But when you understand these are the conditions, then you look for the remedies. Whenever you use the word problem, you are into sorrow. You are into sorrowness, you are into grieving. But when you say this is the condition, I have some heart conditions, some conditions in the heart which needs remedy, which needs attention. That's the way you look into it. Doctor will never say you have a heart problem. Your heart is in this condition. That's the way the medical people will talk. Your heart is in so and so condition. Your lungs are in so and so condition. Your bone is in so and so condition. It's a fracture. Fracture is a condition. Doctor will say, wow, you got a big problem. Your heart is not, there are 8 blockages, means he is saying that it's a problem. But the patient says, so what, doctor? Today we have heart surgeries, open heart surgeries to rectify those blocks. So why don't you do that? Why don't you take care of this condition, address this condition? So that's what we need to say. So Bhagavad Gita is going to tell you there is no problem at all. When there is no problem at all, why should we grieve for it? Why should we feel sorrow for it? So that's what we are going to understand from Bhagavad Gita. So that's what the entire essence of Bhagavad Gita is in this one sloka, verse. So the first sentence of verse 11 is such a powerful sentence. So why do you grieve? You grieve because you think there is a problem. But Bhagavad Gita says that there is nothing like problem at all. When there is nothing like problem, then there is no need for grieving. So that's what Arjuna, Krishna is saying. So now he is going to take another very powerful situation. We are going to understand this sloka, because the coming slokas or the verses are very, very important. We need to understand them in deep. Otherwise, we will be confused. Neither we will be able to accept it, nor we will be able to reject it. So that's a problem. Okay, so we will understand this. So one thing is, yes, Arjuna, you are grieving for something that doesn't deserve grief. Which means what Arjuna says. So what does Arjuna's problem? It's a death or killing of the people. Like Bhishmacharya, Dronacharya and his cousins and so many warriors. So which means we are talking about death here. We are talking about death. Now the one common thing across the world for which people grieve is death. Yes or no? There's one thing, it's very common across the world. Have you ever seen anyone not grieving for a death of something, his kith and kin or something like that? Some death happened in his house, and have you seen someone laughing? Unless he is an insane person, you will never see someone laughing. There will be grief. Everyone grieving for the death. So Lord Krishna takes that, and what does he say? Wise men like you will never grieve. Grieve for whom? Neither for the living nor for the dead person. So here we have to see this. The one thing across this world which is common for everyone to grieve is death. This is what we all believe, and that's what we are going to discuss here, and that's what Lord Krishna is also taking the point here. If death is responsible for grief, do we grieve for anyone's death, or the grief is only related to those people who matters to me. I'm sure you'll all agree the second point is correct. Because in the morning newspaper, in the obituary column, we see, the informations about, people who have died on so and so day, previous day or something like that. We read that many people don't even see the obituary column. But some people who see this obituary column, they feel sorry, oh my God, it's gone. And suppose the person is an young person, he feels a little bit more sorry for that person. But more than that, do we do anything? Do we feel sorrow? Do we cry? No. But when the death happens to someone who matters to me, there the grief is there. So which means death is not the reason for my grief. So we will rule out that possibility of death being responsible for grief, because now we understand if death is the one that is responsible for grief, any death will bring me the grief, the sorrowness, but it doesn't work that way. I grieve or I feel sorrow only for those who matters dies. So which means death as an underlying cause is absolutely ruled out. Are you clear with me? You're all with me now here? It's ruled out. Now, if death is not the underlying factor for my sorrow or for my grief, then what is that? Is my involvement. So when someone matters to me, when I say this person matters to me, my parents matters to me, my spouse matters to me, my children matters to me, this friend matters to me, means what? Which means you have placed yourself in them and you see yourself in them. When the I is not in that, it doesn't matter to me at all. Yes or no? Let us forget the parents and children. Let us take material which has no life, but I give life to that material. Please understand. I see a neighbor's cycle getting damaged. Does it matter to me? Do I feel sorrow or do I feel upset for that? Maybe I will say, oh sorry, what happened to you? Okay, now get it repaired. Oh, there is a repair shop nearby. Maybe if you want, he is my friend, I will help you out. That's it. You will not grieve over the loss or the damage of the bicycle. But if it is your bicycle, the bicycle that you use every day is damaged, how you feel that grief, the sorrowness. Oh my God, my bicycle is damaged. Who the hell has done this? How did this happen? How can I go to the office? See now, the commotions following it. Why? Because it is my bicycle. I am in that bicycle. When I say it is mine, what do I mean? I am in that. I am a part of it. My parents means I am a part of it. I is there. So when you place I there, it automatically belongs to you, and a loss of your belonging brings the grief, and it is not the loss per se brings the grief. That which belongs to me. When I say it belongs to me, I is into that. I am into that. My parents, my children, my spouse, my house, my TV, my car, my body. Yes or no? So the reason for the grief is that I is involved. So death is not the reason for the grief, because that I myself is involved there, it becomes a reason for my grief. So he says, Arjuna, you are grieving for something which doesn't deserve the grief at all. Which means what? One, death is not something that deserves to be grieved. And for whom? And the second statement says, wise men like you, Arjuna. Why does he say wise men like you? Arjuna, you remember in chapter number 1, What were you behavior? What were you behaving like? You were behaving like a wise man, as if you know everything. You told the Shastras, because of these reason, I will not fight the war. Because of these reasons, I will not fight the war. This is Papa, this is Punya. I will not be doing the Papa. For you it is nothing, Krishna. I am going to kill them, and that Papa is going to come for me. The sin is going to come for me. I will be the sinner. So you described what is sin and what is not sin. So someone, if you are able to say so much, if you are going to talk about the Shastra, scriptures so much, then you are a wise person. But Arjuna, remember, a wise person like you will never grieve. Means what? Arjuna, Lord Krishna indirectly says, Arjuna, don't think you are a wise person. You are not a wise person. Why? A wise person will never grieve, but you are grieving. So a wise person will never grieve for the living nor the dead. So what is this wise person is what we are going to understand. When you stop grieving, it means you are in an absolute state of peace. So don't jump into conclusions, don't jump into your own way of defining it. We are going to see a lot. So right now, just to take what I say, a wise person is a person who is absolutely in peace, a state of peacefulness. When you are in a state of peacefulness, you will not grieve. You may feel sorry, but you will never grieve. There is a difference between feeling sorry for something and grieving. So that's what Lord Krishna is going to elaborate much more in the coming slokas or verses. So now what is that we are going to say? I told you sometime before we started the verse number 11, I told you it is a knowledge that's going to help you. Actions are not going to be a solution. Knowledge only is going to be a solution. And knowledge about what? Not about the world, not about your history, mathematics, who is the president of what, who, etc., etc. No. This knowledge is going to do nothing to you. It may help you in earning money. It is okay for survival, but life is beyond survival. Survival is only for animals, not for humans. For human, it is life. For animals, maybe survival. But we are into survival mode. So we are trying to know. We are putting all our efforts to know more and more about the external world. But what is more important is the self-knowledge, knowing about self. Ignorance about self is what is responsible for grief. Henceforth, I am not going to use the word problem. I am going to either use the word grief or a peaceful peace. So ignorance about self is what is responsible for the grief, and self-knowledge or knowledge about the self is what is going to be responsible for the peacefulness of a human. And Bhagavad Gita is going to give that self-knowledge. To start that self-knowledge, Arjuna starts with that grief is nothing. There is nothing like grief. Because if death itself doesn't deserve grief, then what else is going to deserve grief? Tell me. And wise men will never grieve for the living one or the dead one. Which means, what is this wisdom? What does this wise man means? A wise man is a person who has got a self-knowledge, knowing about himself. That's what we are going to see in Bhagavad Gita, which Krishna is going to slowly get into it step after step. And the second understanding we need to, I told you before, the problem is also not because of the situation or because of the condition. If situation is going to be the cause of problem, then that situation will be problematic for everyone. Whomsoever gets into that situation is going to be in problem and is going to be grieving. But is it so? For example, let us take a robbery. A is being robbed by B. So the situation is what? Robbery. A is robbed and B is B is the one who did the robbery. The robbery is a situation now. A feels sorrow and B feels happy, because for A it is a loss, for B it is a gain. So if robbery is the situation called robbery is the reason for my problem, then both the person who is being robbed and the robber should feel grieved or should feel sorrow, or that situation should be a problem for both of them. No. Now look here. A is being robbed by B, who is a robber. Now what happens? A is feeling sorrow because it's a problem for A, but for B it is a welcome situation. Now immediately after that, the police catches the thief, the robber. Now what happens? It's all the robbery related. Now the robber feels sorrow because he is being caught, and the police feels happy because they could able to catch the thief. After catching the thief, they recover the stolen things and hand over to A. Now A feels happy. Now look at how the situation is robbery. Now our emotions are fluctuating. A initially felt sorrow, later on he felt happy. The thief initially felt happy, later on he was unhappy. But the same situation, it's a situation where the robbery is happening. So if situation is responsible for my grief or sorrowness, then the similar situation should be a problem for everyone. But that is not the case we have seen. If exam is responsible for the problem, it's a problem for one who was not well prepared for the exam, but the person who is well prepared for the exam, it's not a problem. Now the person who is not well prepared comes out and say, wow, the question paper is very tough. The person who has done well prepared and did the exam very well comes and says, question paper is easy. Now the question paper is same for A and B. A is the one who prepared well and B is the one who is not prepared. Now the question paper is same, but A says question paper is easy, B says question paper is tough. Now tell me, are they having different question papers? No. So if question paper is the reason for the problem, then A also should be in problem like B. But A is absolutely comfortable, B is not comfortable. So which means it is not the question paper that is responsible for their comfortness or uncomfortness. It is their own self is responsible for that. Because A is well prepared, for him the question paper is absolutely easy and he is comfortable. And because B didn't prepare well, the question paper is tough and is not comfortable, is uncomfortable. So now the other learning that we need to understand is that, okay, if at all you say the situation is the reason for the problem, that is also not true, because everyone in a similar situation doesn't see the situation as a problem. I can give any number of examples, and you also can create your own n number of examples, or maybe you can put your own life experience and say some situation where you felt comfortable, someone was not absolutely comfortable. So situation is not responsible for the problem. That is another understanding we should understand. Take it from here. So it is only the ignorance that is responsible for everything. But have you ever seen anyone saying, oh, it is only my ignorance responsible for the problem, nothing else? Have you ever heard anyone saying this? We are so habituated pointing fingers externally. This is the cause for my problem. This is the cause for my problem. He is the cause for my problem. He is the cause for my problem. We are so used to pointing fingers outside, but we fail to point the fingers towards us. my ignorance is responsible for for the situation or for whatever has happened. It is not that external situation. So the day we start understanding my ignorance is responsible for the problem, then you will be out of the problem. You suddenly realize there is nothing like problem. It is my level of ignorance is responsible. Once I create or work out on my level of ignorance, everything should be fine. It is a very simple thing. You know the olden days TV. I'm sure many people will remember this olden days TV where you have a antenna which is fixed on the terrace. And many of those people who have experienced that TV will also remember this what I say. You would have also experienced. You fix that antenna, the guy comes, installs, fix that antenna in a particular direction, your TV screen is now with pictures. So you get different channels. Suddenly the wind blows heavily and the direction of the antenna is changed. Now what happens? Your screen is blank. Picture is not coming in the TV screen. Now you go and see your neighbor's TV, and in the neighbor's TV no issues. Picture is seen. Now you go to upstairs and you see their TV. Picture is fine, no issues. So their TV is also fine, no issues. Now you come again and see your TV, it is blank. And then suddenly you realize, oh, the problem is not with the TV, and the problem is with the antenna. So once you correct the antenna, the picture comes in. Similarly, once you correct your ignorance, everything is visible there. If TV is the problem, then everyone's TV should be having the similar problem. So it is my problem, specific to me, my antenna. So the problem is only specific to me, right? So what happens? I go, I send someone upstairs, ask that person to correct it. Once you start changing this direction, then you see slowly the picture coming into the TV, and once it is put on the right direction, then you see the TV picture is in a very clear form. So what is the problem? The problem is with me. The problem is not universal. It is my antenna. My antenna is what? My ignorance. My knowledge level is the problem. So that is what here Arjuna's in the first sloka we need to understand. It is our ignorance, because by the verse number 11, a powerful verse where he says, Arjuna, you are grieving for those which he doesn't deserve to be grieved at all. And the second sentence says, Arjuna, wise men like you will never grieve for anything. When he says anything, he goes to the topmost, neither for the living nor for the dead. With that powerful sloka, Arjuna starts. Krishna starts with the Bhagavad Gita. So now now we are going to see the introduction of verse number 12, because for verse number 12 we need to understand certain things outside the basic things, and then we should start understanding verse number 12. So let me introduce the verse number 12 here. Verse number 12, Krishna continues saying, even in the before period, it is not that I was not there. Same is with you and all the others here. Even in the before periods, it is not that I was not there. See, two negatives. It is not that I was not there, which means what? I was there. And the same is with you, which means what? What you see right now as Arjuna and Krishna, right? It is this one period. Even in the earlier periods, I was there, you were there, all the others were there. Now we need to understand this also in context with something else, which I will try to put it across. And the second line, Krishna continues to say, even in the coming periods, it is not that we will not be there. Which means what? We are going to take more janmas. So here Krishna says, there were so many janmas before. You were there, I was also there, Arjuna. there are going to be more Janmas to come, in which you are also going to be there, I am also going to be there. So what you see right now as Arjuna, Bhishmacharya, Dronacharya, or even me as Krishna Arjuna, is not that we are here only for now. We were there earlier, we are now here, and we are also going to be there in the coming Janmas also, or the coming period. So instead of using the word Janma, Lord Krishna says period. He refers to the Kala, that time. So now, this is something we need to understand. What is that Krishna tries to say here? Even in the earlier periods, it was not that I was not there, and the same is with you. In the coming periods also, it is not that you will not be there or I will not be there. So this is a very, very powerful another sloka. The verse number, the chapter number 2 is such a heavy topic. We need to know a lot of things. It is going to break our beliefs. It's going to challenge your knowledge. It's going to challenge your belief systems. So be prepared, my dear friends. When you are going with your verse number, chapter number 2, be prepared to take these things. So to understand this, we have to go a little bit more deep. We have to understand certain things. We have to understand what is our body, all those things, which I am not going to touch upon here. I am going to take up this in the next class, because this is certain. Once I could able to expand this, give you the basics of this, the coming slokas will be able to go a little bit much more easily. Fine. So from 12, 13, except 14, 15 till sloka verse number 25, Lord Krishna is going to talk about Atmajnana. Very, very important knowledge one need to obtain. We are used only to those things which we are able to experience. We are able to accept only those things which we are able to experience. That is why we are calling science for everything. Is it scientifically proved? We ask everything, is it scientifically proved? Which means science is something where the experience is there. You experience something. You do experiments. That is why in science we always call, they do a lot of experiments. When you are doing experiments, there is an experiencing happening. So we are in a world where only that which we can experience, we are able to accept. But the fact is that there are certain things which is beyond our experience, which is only at the knowledge level. So we are also going to understand this fact that everything is not for subject to experience. There are certain things which is only at the knowledge level. It is only stands at the knowledge level. It is not subject to our experience. So Atmajnanam is only a knowledge level. If you try to go for an experiencing of Atma, you will get defeated. Either you get confused or you will reject it. So let me give this brief about Atmajnana. It is a knowledge. It is not something for experiencing, and this knowledge is very, very vital for us. If you want to obtain peace, if you want to be in a state of peace all the time, Jnanam is very, very important. That is knowledge about self. Atma talks about self. Atmajnana. It is only a knowledge. So never try to go for an experiencing of Atma. It is not going to happen. You are not going to get that experience. So this topic, Atmajnanam, is a knowledge related one, right? So keep it at that level, and we are going to see in depth in the next few slokas, almost another 10 to 12 slokas, we are going to have a complete knowledge about this. And each verse will take a little bit time, because as I told you, what you are going to see right now is beyond our experience. Accepting anything which is beyond our experience is not that easy, and make you people also to know something which is beyond your experience is also going to be challenging. I need to go in elaboration with all this in all these verses which I will be doing it. So we will be going very slowly for the next few verses up till 25th verse. We will be going very slowly, but I feel that's the way this need to be taken. So I stop with the introduction of verse number 12, where Lord Krishna says, even in the before periods, it is not that I was not there, and same is with you also, and the others whom you see here. Which means they were there for in different periods. And continuing, Krishna says, even in the coming period, it is not that we will not be there. So we are going to understand this. Before we understand this sloka, this verse, we need to gain some knowledge on certain other areas. Then we will be able to understand this. What is that is there? What is that is not there? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti